Week 1 of the NFL season was full of revenge games. Russell Wilson against the Seahawks. You had Joe Flacco against the Ravens. Patrick Mahomes against his old college head coach Cliff Kingsbury. Tua Tagovailoa versus his old college backup Mac Jones. Daniel Jones versus common sense. Von Miller against the Rams, and the biggest of all, Baker Mayfield up against the Browns, the team that traded him after backstabbing him and trading for Deshaun Watson. Week 1, Browns at Panthers. It was wild. Baker got off to a really bad start. Early, even when he was actually completing his passes, they still weren't really going for any yardage. Myles Garrett even sacked Baker in back-to-back plays. In the first quarter, Baker went 6 of 13, had an absolutely horrible interception, had 4 passes tipped, was sacked twice, and dropped 2 snaps. The home crowd even booed him at one point. That's not very good, but he did figure it out. Going into the second half, the Panthers trailed 17-7, and were down 20-7 going into the third, but damn if Baker didn't wake the hell up. In the fourth, Carolina put together an 11-play drive that was capped off by a Christian McCaffrey touchdown. The Panthers got the ball back with 6 minutes remaining, and on the first play from scrimmage, Baker hit Robbie Anderson for a deep 75-yard touchdown. Carolina got it back, and Eddie Pinheiro hit a 34-yarder to put the Panthers up 1 with a minute left, but Cleveland still found a way. I mean, this week, we saw a shit ton of kickers just completely miss. I don't know that I've ever seen so many in 1 week, but Cleveland's did not. 4th-round rookie Cade York drilled a 58-yarder to win the game. Baker finished 16 of 27 for 235 yards and a touchdown to an interception. Not great, but it could have been worse. One of the biggest things that I do think Baker really showcased was that he can make plays and that he can really turn things around. Even if he starts a game off bad, if he can be that guy, he can do it. The biggest problem, though, is that he isn't always that guy. In a way, he proved today not only why the Panthers took a shot on him, because he is so explosive and can make fun plays and be a really good player, but he also in a way showed why the Browns didn't necessarily want him, because he can be inconsistent and he can really be bad at sometimes. I will say, it was so odd seeing Baker Mayfield in Carolina blue. Like, something just felt off. For the past few years, when you thought about the Browns, you probably thought about Baker. Do you remember how bad Cleveland was before he got there? The Browns were 1-31 in 2 seasons before they drafted him first overall in 2018. He completely helped change the culture. In his rookie year alone, Baker went 6-7 after he threw for 3,725 yards and 27 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. The dude was even on the NFL top 100 players of 2019 at 50. Not to mention, he did all that with Hugh Jackson as his head coach before he got fired mid-season and the role went to Greg Williams. Now, Baker did have one hell of a sophomore slump, and honestly, I blame that on Freddie Kitchens, who Cleveland hired to be the new head coach. Kitchens was, he was a shitty head coach. The Browns regressed to 6-10, and Baker struggled at times. He recorded 3,800 yards and 22 touchdowns, but it came with 21 interceptions. Kitchens ended up getting fired, and lucky for Baker, he got to get his 4th head coach in only 3 years, Kevin Stefanski. All it took was a single year under Stefanski for the Browns to turn everything around. Cleveland made the playoffs and won a game for the first time since 1994. 1994. I wasn't even born for another 5 years. Baker played well too. 3,500 yards and 26 touchdowns to only 8 interceptions. Things were looking up in Cleveland, and then it came crashing down last year. Baker really struggled. He suffered a torn labrum, but continued to play. He went 6-10, threw for 3,010 yards and 17 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. Clearly, Cleveland felt the need to get a better quarterback, and once Deshaun Watson was on the roster, well, the bridge had been burned with Baker, so they traded him to Carolina for a 5th-round pick. Let's be real though, I don't think anybody is gonna convince you that the Panthers are a better team than the Browns, but at the very least, it sounds like they do believe in Baker. The Panthers have been trying to solve their quarterback problems for a minute. They traded for Sam Darnold last year, and he ended up playing pretty bad. I mean, he had 2,500 yards, and he only had 9 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. Safe to say that Matt Rule needed a new guy behind center. Carolina did also draft Matt Corral, but he suffered a Liz Frank injury, and so he's going to miss the entire season. Say what you will about Carolina, but they do have some good-ass playmakers on that roster. I think the biggest question is going to be whether or not Christian McCaffrey can stay healthy. The last 2 years, he's struggled to stay on the field, but don't forget what this dude did in 2019. He rushed for almost 1,400 yards and had 1,000 receiving yards. McCaffrey found the end zone 19 times. I have to imagine that the plan is for the Panthers offense to continue to run through him. There are some other solid guys too, like DJ Moore. He is the number one wideout, and he's recorded over 1,000 yards in each of the last 3 years. Moore will probably be the top target for Baker. There is also Robbie Anderson and Terrace Marshall, who have some questions for sure. Anderson had over 1,000 yards in 2020, and Marshall was the second rounder last year, but he didn't really do shit. Carolina also attempted to address the horrendous offensive line at the draft, selecting Akeem Ekwonu 6th overall, so hopefully that's a much improved unit this season too. It's pretty obvious that the Panthers don't have a better roster than the Browns, but that doesn't mean that they won't necessarily be the better team in 2021, and the biggest reason for that is Deshaun Watson. If you remember watching Deshaun Watson play 2 years ago plus, you know how good he could be. He stepped into the league as a rookie, and he was damn impressive. In 2019, he led the Texans to an 11-5 long legal battle. He was found not guilty by a grand jury, but the NFL still looked for punishment for the egregious acts. Watson was originally suspended 6 games, but after a settlement, it became 11. I talked earlier about how there was a lot of revenge games in week 1. Well, here's the best revenge game of the year. Deshaun Watson's first game in almost 2 years is against the Texans in Houston. I can't possibly imagine what those fans will be. Cleveland gave him a huge 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed deal. Cleveland is betting hard on Deshaun Watson being that same guy from 2020, and luckily for him, the roster around him is going to be really good. The offensive line is elite, and you can make the argument that it's the best in the league, but it needs to stay healthy. Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin both missed time last season, but if everyone stays on the field, Cleveland will be unstoppable, and so are their 2 running backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Chubb is one of the best backs in the league, and Hunt is explosive as hell, whether it's with the ball in his hands or outside of a hotel room. The Browns did go out and try to get a number 1 wide receiver in Amari Cooper. He has 4 seasons with over 1,000 yards in his career, and he's a good wideout. Dallas needed to get him off the books, so Cleveland got him for a 5th round pick. The Browns also gave tight end David Njoku a nice 4-year, $54 million extension to keep him around. Njoku only has 1 year with over 500 yards, but I guess we'll see how that plays out. There is plenty of talent in Cleveland though. Talent that Baker Mayfield couldn't always get the job done with. Now, Baker has moved on, and the Browns have to sit back and just patiently wait for Deshaun Watson's suspension to end and hope that he's the same guy he was 2 years ago.